Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Be me, in the Navy, on a submarine, standing watch as quartermaster in control, chilling out in deep water in the middle of nowhere, waiting for some exercises with the British Navy to begin. We're already on station. We have 24 hours to kill, literally driving in circles at 4 knots in the middle of nowhere. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the whole boat starts to shake. Loud grinding noise coming from outside of the hull. Shaking suddenly stops. Officer the deck yells at me and asks if we just ran aground. Charted water depth is 2,000 fathoms. Take a sounding, checks with a chart. Officer is calling maneuvering, trying to figure out if something just broke in the engine room. Shaking starts again, along with the grinding noise. There's a speaker in control which repeats the sound picked up over the sonar spherical array. Suddenly there's a noise from it. Sounds like a low-pitched groaning, almost yelling. Literally sounds like an old can just broke his hip. Shaking stops. Noise continues for 15 more seconds. Nobody knows what just happened. Never happens again. When we come back into port, we discover that about 5 of the SHT tiles, superior hull treatment, basically like rubber tiles that absorb sound, so we're harder to find on active sonar, are ripped off the side of the boat. Nobody ever figured out what happened.
So/X/, this happened to me today just about 12 hours ago. Not really paranormal, but still terrifying. Be snorkeling with my fiancé and family off the coast of Bermuda in a chartered boat. The diversity of marine wildlife is absolutely stunning. We saw all sorts of colorful fish, dolphins, sea turtles, and a pair of humpback whales. Check the time on the waterproof watch and notice it's close to dinner time. While swimming back to the boat, I noticed a freakishly massive underwater shape in the distance approaching. At first I think it's another whale, but as it slowly gets closer I realize that the thing is enormously bigger than any whale that I'm familiar with. Recount the life-size model of a blue whale at the Museum of Natural History. Whatever was seen could easily be as long as 3 of those placed end to end. At this point, trembling in the water. Oddly, despite terror, I feel compelled to watch it get closer. As it does see no discernible features, no fins, mouths, or tentacles as one would expect. It's just a 300-foot underwater elongated shaped thing. Cannot begin to contemplate what I'm looking at. Stranger still, it is making no noise whatsoever and is moving not much faster than I can swim. Eventually it gets close enough to see clearly. Observe the surface texture and realize that it is metal and not flesh. Look toward the back and see the T-shaped dorsal tower. Then the realization hits me. Wait a minute, it's a submarine. Feel overcome with relief and a biting exasperation of myself for not figuring it out. Watch it pass, wondering what country it belongs to. On the side of the tower see a red star with a yellow outline and some illegible Asian letters. It's either Chinese or North Korean, the former is more likely. Watch the propeller pass and swim back to the charter boat. Ask everyone if they saw it and they're looking at me like I'm an idiot. They didn't see it. So yeah, there are Chinese submarines near Bermuda.
Be me 2 summers ago. Living at home with mom because of neat life. Crippling back pain from a god-awful mattress. Can't sleep because of debilitating pain. Stay up all night, marathon Demon Slayer anime. Start to lose interest around the Spider Family arc but power through. Finish the season, disappointed with it. About 6 a.m. Live near the beach. Might as well try to walk a little and see if I can't spot some morning whales or dolphins. Difficult, but manage to get dressed and slowly make my way out to the beach. Some people went out, mostly oldies or joggers. Sink my toes into the sand. See Catalina Island in the distance. Wait, what's that? Something is sticking up out of the water maybe a couple 100 feet from the shoreline. A tall steel cylinder. I can't tell what the hell this thing is, it's just floating out there. There's what looks like a big circular disc underneath it. Looks kind of like a giant satellite dish. Hobble as quickly as possible back inside. Grab binoculars, get back out. Still there. Use binoculars. It sunk a little into the water, but yeah, still a big narrow cylinder coming out of a weird flat dish thing. Stare at it for a while. Notice the little sailboat. People on it were staring at the metal thing. Look around. No joggers or old folks paying attention. Go back to staring at the disc. Eventually I get bored. Go back inside for breakfast and more anime. Tell mom about it when she wakes up. Thinking back to it, I have this weird notion that I saw humanoid figures on the disc with the cylinder, but I genuinely can't recall if I did or I'm mixing this memory up with the sailboat that for sure had people on it. The whole situation was really weird in general. It definitely wasn't a boat or submarine. At least not one that I've ever seen, and I've never seen anything like it since.
Names and places won't be mentioned in this story because it involves a deployment that happened relatively recently. 3 years ago, somewhere in the Pacific. Final sea tour on a submarine, getting ready to come home before crew rotation. Doing roves, checking valve positions and flow meters when I hear an almighty banging noise. The hell was that, .png. Not the only one that hears it, since my senior chief of the time yells down from upper level to investigate. Do a quick rove of lower level in the bilge. Nothing. Report to the senior chief. He sends me through to check the engine room along with some of the off-duty nukes. There's this tunnel that goes through the ship above the reactor compartment, and there's this little 1x1 lead glass window to see down into it. I take a glance because I like looking at the cool nuke stuff. I nearly crap myself when I see someone down in there staring at one of the big-ass steam generators. I start yelling and we end up having to kill primary propulsion so we can go down into the room. Reactor gets partially scrammed, which also kills all non-essential power. There are only 2 little red lights in that room amongst 20 to 40-foot containers, pumps, and valves. Screw this .png. We search around for a solid 20 minutes with flashlights, but we can't find anything. At this point, I'm well and royally spooked. I know I saw a person in here, I say to the senior chief. Rest of my rove goes by uneventfully. I get relieved for the night. Forget about it a few days later. When we pulled into port as we rotated crews, someone found a set of coveralls that belonged to someone that died on the ship a few years previously. Where'd you find it, I ask. Reactor compartment. If I can't get a different ship when it comes time to renew my contract and I have to go out to sea again, I'm getting out of the Navy.
I've been a free diver for years, and while I have seen plenty of the weirdness the ocean has to offer, the weirdest thing I've seen is something reproducing light blinking patterns below me. Like many free divers, we wore strobe lights helping us easily locate each other in case of a problem, and easily notify someone who would be in difficulty. Our different lights blinked at different intervals, some having regular patterns, others like mine having a bit more complicated ones, 3 short flashes every 2 seconds. It was cloudy below us, we couldn't see shit, and at some point we saw flashes of light coming from within the clouds. We counted each other to see if someone was missing, but we were all there, so we thought it could be another group of divers, surely scubas. That's when I realized the flashes weren't erratic, they mimicked those of our strobes with a short delay. 2 of us decided to dive further and have a look, but they haven't found anything, and the flashes stopped. The most sane explanation was that we ran into some life form that could produce light and that reacted to our strobes, and such sea animals exist, just not around there, not at such depths, not with such precision, and then they don't usually just mysteriously disappear. Otherwise, while there are plenty of spooky things, most of it is normal. The sea itself is spooky, but that's just how it is.
Does free diving terrify you? I have a fear of the ocean that I can't really explain why I have it. I just know I don't want to be anywhere near it and could never free dive.
I don't find it spooky, even if I never lived near the sea myself, though I went once a year on average for like 2 weeks since I was a kid, so I got used to it pretty early. But it is a strange place, even to me. I'm more surprised by the looks of boats, the stance sea people have towards the sea, which they see in a very different way, and all these weird habits and things they do which don't seem to make sense to me. Harbors creep me way more than the sea does. Harbors and people around it creep me for plenty of reasons. Well, to begin with, most harbors I've known were small, old ones, with plenty fishing boats, so I'm not talking about those recent, good-looking harbors filled with luxury yachts there are in some places which I'm perfectly fine with, and that's mostly in France, though I've seen the same things in several countries. Those types of harbors are always dirty, and pretty much every part exposed to water is covered in moss, which makes them appear abandoned in a way. In every other area, from beaches to modern harbors, water flows freely and renews itself, but in those harbors, it stagnates for quite some time, making them look unlike anything else close to the sea, and it reminds me more of sewers than anything. The smell is similar to, and I hate that old harbor smell. Then, there are the boats. Old boats are very different from rather modern ones. They're made mainly out of steel that rusts in several places. The paint is pretty much entirely off, and if anything, when they try to apply a new coat of paint to one, it makes it look much creepier. They also have plenty things everywhere that seem to make no utilitarian sense, things which you don't actually see anymore on modern boats, like some traps that they seem to open and close based on some mysterious imperative known only to sailors. They do things with ropes that clearly serve no purpose, and there are those weird floaters everywhere of a dull orange color that make no sense, like some of those being tied to the boat itself, when they so obviously can't make it float, but hey, they need to be there. Sea people love superstition, and I've always been convinced that this is the explanation behind many of the apparently pointless things they do. But then there's also how they like to look important and show they know what they're doing, and they want to show you they're better than you are. It's easily noticed by someone who's not from that place, renting a boat which I kinda know how to man. Though I always bring friends who know too, and see all the local drunk sailors look at you and laugh, and making up bullshit reasons to try to prove you're in fact incapable of manning a boat and simply doing things wrong, when you're in fact doing it right, and arguing about the order some things should be done when it makes absolutely no difference. And then I don't know, I never kept trace of it, but there are plenty more weird things they do and say. I just don't like it. I guess it's part of the fact that most of them don't like strangers and do everything they can to make them feel uneasy, and it does work, but then everything about it just seems wrong to me. Oh, another thing, it all comes with its own language, and locals always insist on using some specific names and verbs to describe things which can actually be done easily in any other language. And seeing as you usually don't know any of it, they usually tell you to do one thing in their own language, and then repeat it with a proper one, which they have no problem to do for some reason, making their language entirely superfluous. Plus, their language wears off the more you have them use normal words, and they end up speaking normally without realizing it. The funny part is when you have them notice it, and then they suddenly revert to their seaman language out of frustration.
This actually does remind me of a thing that happened to me once. I was in Galveston and my family and I decided to ride the ferry across because we're poor and that was like the only way we'd be able to get on a boat during our trip. The trip itself took all our cash. This is pre-Ike, by the way. Anyway, we rode the ferry over to the Bolivar Peninsula, but it's late at night because my brother is kind of a douche. Anyway, we decided to get something to eat there at a gas station. There was a closed supermarket, an old motel, and 2 gas stations we visited. Everyone there was really freaking weird. Like, they all had bloodshot eyes and were just staring at us. I mean, Bolivar Peninsula and Crystal Beach aren't exactly tourist destinations, but I mean a lot of traffic comes from Galveston to there, so you'd think they'd be used to strangers. They were all really creepy. People loitering around doing absolutely nothing, just kinda standing there. I got the weirdest vibes from those people, and even my super skeptic parents did. Eventually we just decided to leave because we were kinda afraid for our safety. We've gone back, though not at night, after Ike, and pretty much all of those places were blown away. It's not really the same anymore, or at least it wasn't the last time I was there.
On March 24th in 1803 at the beach of Harato no Hama, Uenyadoru-bang in the Hitachi province, a strange boat was washed ashore. It reminded the witnesses of a rice cooking pot. Around its middle it had a thickened rim. It was also coated with black paint and it had 4 little windows on 4 sides. The windows had bars and they were clogged with tree resin. The lower part of the boat was protected by brazen plates which looked to be made of iron of the highest Western quality. The height of the boat was 3.33 meters, 1 inches, and its breadth was 5.41 meters, 212.9 inches. A woman of 20 years was found in the boat. Her body size was 1.5 meters, 492 feet, and her skin was as white as snow. The long hair dangled smoothly down along her back. Her face was of indescribable beauty. The dress of the woman was of unknown style and no one could recognize it. She spoke an unknown language. She held a small box no one was allowed to touch. Inside the boat, 2 unusually soft carpets of unknown style and fabric were found. There were supplies such as cake, kneaded food, and meat. A beautiful decorated cup with ornaments no one could identify was also found. Some ufologists suggest the Utsurobune could have been an unidentified submarine object, USO. They note the mysterious symbols which were reportedly found on the object that regularly appear as addenda within the depictions. They are suggested by some to be similar to the symbols reported at the Rendlesham Forest incident in England. UFO proponents further point to the ominous box held by the woman as well as her physical appearance and unusual dress as evidence of an extraterrestrial encounter. The assumptions of any historian and ethnologist about those items are repeatedly ignored.
Is it possible that the Titanic was sunk by a German U-boat? I've only recently thought about this possibility, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. The iceberg story is well accepted, but there are several peculiar facts that support an attack on the ship by a German submarine. 1. Several survivors, including both passengers and crew members, when questioned by a U.S. Senate inquiry panel, testified that they never felt any impact or heard any sound when the collision occurred, suggesting it was minor in nature. However, they reported having heard 4 explosions deep in the bowels of the Titanic after it had scraped the iceberg. 2. A number of survivors huddled in lifeboats observed a searchlight in the distance, encouraging them that a rescue vessel was approaching. This light had been attributed to the Californian, but that ship's captain, Stanley Lord, insisted that it was not his, that there was another vessel between his and the Titanic. The Californian was mired in a colossal ice field and forced to remain there until daylight. Several sailors on watch asserted that they witnessed an unidentified vessel approximately 5 to 6 miles away until about 2 a.m., possibly a submarine that had surfaced to assess the damage it had caused, after which time it skulked off. For the record, this was not the Carpathia, which arrived on the scene later to assist in rescuing survivors. 3. The Titanic sent out the distress signal, "We have struck an iceberg and sinking by the head," to the German ship Frankfurt, but that signal was simply ignored, and no response was given. 4. Most significantly, Germany had the technology at the time to sink the Titanic. Germany's first U-boat design, the U-1, was commissioned into the Imperial German Navy in 1906 and contained 1 torpedo launching tube. The better-designed German U-2 submarine was twice as large as the U-1 and was commissioned in 1908 and contained 2 torpedo launching tubes. At the start of World War I, during the month August 1914, the German Navy had 48 U-boats of 13 classes in service or under construction. Germany thus most certainly had the capability to have destroyed the Titanic in 1912, especially when you realize that the Lusitania was a passenger ship of similar size and capacity and was destroyed by the German Navy U-boat only 3 years after the Titanic sank. Why did they sink the Titanic? It could have been to take out the several important VIPs on the ship that had immense influence on the global economy and politics, for example, John Jacob Astor. Or they might have wanted to sink Britain's most prized possession because of the Anglo-German rivalry that was building up at the time. While the Germans did possess submarine technology at the time, this would have been mostly European patrol vessels. The Titanic actually didn't sink that far off the American continental shelf, and I'm sure stationary bases on land would have had the ability to detect any activity. In regards to point 1, it wasn't really even a collision, and probably wouldn't have felt like one. I think it was more of a tear, and it wasn't even that big a wound in the ship anyway. It's possible that passengers wouldn't have felt that at all if they were far from it. It's a pretty damn big boat. The only piece of evidence I could really see supporting that would be that it's so rare to find any sort of iceberg so far south.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.